Axios is reporting that President Trump is leaning towards striking Iran to punish the regime for killing protesters. A White House official tells Axios that a final decision has not been made, as the president has also been exploring proposals for negotiations with Iran, something the president himself alluded to as he was speaking to reporters on Air Force One last night.
We're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options. I think they're tired of being beat up by the United States. Iran wants to negotiate this. We may meet with them. I mean, a meeting is being set up, but we may have to act because of what's happening before the meeting.
In the last 16 days, more than 10,000 people have been arrested and more than 500 protesters in Iran have been killed. With an internet blackout in the country, some disturbing videos have now come to light. This video, obtained by CNN, shows a disturbing scene at a makeshift morgue outside of a medical center. You can see there are dozens of bodies in black bags laid out across the ground, as Iranians can be heard in the background screaming in anguish as they are just trying to identify their loved ones. I want to bring in my next sources tonight. Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari, who's the first Iranian-American Democrat to serve in Congress, and Beth Sanner, who's the former Deputy Director of National Intelligence. And Beth, I want to get to you on what the president's options are on here. But first, just Congresswoman, seeing those images to me was incredibly jarring, just to see all of these bags. I mean, we see the numbers that we're getting. They're the best numbers we can get. But I mean, it doesn't seem like we have any idea actually how bad it is inside Iran right now.
You're absolutely right. Even watching these videos is really distressing for me. My parents fled this regime and came to the U.S. in the 70s. We have friends and family still in Iran. These protests are being called a revolution because they really are the largest and most sustained protests there have been in years since the Women Life Freedom movement in 2022. And what the regime is doing is cutting off people from internet access. They're shutting down phone lines. And while there is a complete blackout of the internet, they are using that opportunity to commit mass atrocities against people. The estimates say several hundred people have died, but most of the dissidents and folks on the ground say that number could be in the thousands. Reports, firsthand testimony from doctors say that the hospitals are just completely overwhelmed, not just in Tehran, but in some of the other smaller cities around the country. So it's really dire, and that's why one of the most urgent calls that I have for the administration and for Congress is to support Iranian people in accessing the internet. In the NDAA in 2025, there was actually, language around supporting direct-to-cell internet access for Iranian people. We just need to fund that. That is already in there, but that's something that Donald Trump could do immediately, and it would be a huge help to the Iranian people so that they can connect, get videos out about what's going on, and make sure that their stories are being amplified.
Okay, so you'd like to see him step in that way to be able to help them at least be able to tell the world what's happening inside of there. Beth, when it comes to the president's options, he has made very clear that he thinks a military strike is on the table here. I don't think anyone thinks that that's not possible, just given, obviously, he struck Iran over the summer. When you look at his options, though, and if he goes after their security services, which is what we're hearing from sources, what would that look like? How would that actually impact the regime here?
So, I mean, I think that this is a really difficult decision to make because it is hard to conduct military strikes in a way that is going to deal with this very dispersed IRGC and Basij forces throughout the country, right? We're hearing 130 cities, every province. So how is that going to work? So he's going to have to figure out if he wants to do a military strike, does he strike a headquarters of IRGC, a Basij headquarters? Some of these things were already struck by the Israelis in the 12-day war, but, he risks kind of an Obama moment, right? He risks
What do you mean by that?
I mean the red line in Syria, where Obama said, do not do this otherwise. And the Syrian regime conducted these chemical weapons attacks and atrocities, and we did nothing. And so now, because President Trump has said, I'm coming in guns a-blazing, if you kill protesters, well, we know.
They're killing protesters.
They're killing protesters. And I think this whole idea of negotiations I hope it's not serious. I hope he's actually just playing for time in terms of moving our forces in and figuring out covert and potentially military options.
Why do you hope it's not serious?
Because if he negotiates with this regime, he is legitimizing a regime that not only has done all of these atrocities over years, thousands and thousands of Iranians have died. Executions last year, they reached a new record for them, but also hundreds of Americans have died at the hands of Iranians, and President Trump had an assassination attempt by the Iranians. So this is a horrible regime, so you don't want to legitimize it. And if you do, the Iranian people are the ones that will pay. And the last thing I'll say is, doesn't this feel different than Venezuela, where we literally have legitimized this regime that's completely illegitimate?
Well, and Congressman, if strikes are an option, and he does take that. You said you thought the strikes in the Iranian nuclear facilities last summer, you thought they were illegal. Would you support military action in furtherance of the protesters on the ground in Iran right now?
I think my issue with the way that the Trump administration has handled foreign policy is that it's been completely chaotic. And to your point of what I said, in many cases, they've taken illegal actions without coming to Congress. I think that if there are credible plans and the Trump administration wants to look at any sort of military action in Iran, then he does need to present that to Congress, show the intelligence, and show why it's in the benefit of the American public. At the end of the day, I don't think Americans want another endless war. Americans don't want boots on the ground. However, I do think there's actions that the administration can take to support Iranian people, whether it's covert operations, cyber attacks, other opportunities. And I am also concerned that first Donald Trump emboldened protesters to go out onto the streets and said, we will protect you. And now, talking of negotiating with this regime that's literally murdering them, you're giving very mixed signals to Iranian people about whether or not the United States has their back or not.
Congresswoman, great to have you, especially just given your heritage and your parents. So thank you for joining tonight. Betsy Hunter as well. Always great to have your expertise. Up next here for us on The Source, we're going to remember the life and the legacy of Bob Weir, a founding member of the Grateful Dead who died this weekend. My Source is a huge Deadhead. Andy Cohen is here right after the break.